Hey everyone. In this video, let's take a look at Pluto stationing retrograde. Right now, we're about 9 or so days away. Here on the 29th or 30th of April, we have Pluto stationing retrograde. On the 30th, basically within a day of the stationing, we have the first of two eclipses. This is a new moon. This is a solar eclipse happening with Uranus right there, also on the North Node. The second eclipse, about a couple weeks later, will be a full moon, a lunar eclipse with the moon on the South Node. So this is meaningful because eclipses are very powerful portals where a lot of energy moves in, comes out. The opportunity for accelerated evolutionary growth happens, especially if we're dealing with the South Node in Scorpio. What wants to be composted? At the core, this is not about the content of our life, it's about the content within. We can easily become very object focused with any strong Pluto or Scorpio transit, but the greater teaching and the more empowering perspective is what in me is calling for healing. Where are my own investments in security and power, in that which is actually not secure at all? Where am I holding on? Where am I called to correct my own mind, where there's attachment, where there's craving, aversion, obsession? What are my deepest fears? We always find with Pluto what we're afraid to let go of and what we're afraid to also want. Sometimes the threshold of our growth really means stepping into a deeper claiming of what's calling us forward on the evolutionary journey, just as much as really recognizing where we're holding ourselves back through our control, through our fixation, through our holding. Meeting either of those really means facing what we're most afraid of. And the core of Pluto work is our fear of loss, deep concern with what we might gain, our deep needs that say, I need this, and deep concern with what we might lose. Who am I if I lose this? One of my students recently asked me the question in one of our classes, what's the difference between desire and need when it comes to the soul's evolutionary journey? And the reflections that arise are, we can create, we can think we need something, right? We can become incredibly fixated. I need this, right? And that need is much more of a grasping and a holding on to. The vibrational reality of that needing is not supportive to our own evolution because it basically affirms and states that in this moment, I do not have what I need. However, that which is relevant to our evolutionary growth will always be given. But we can resist it. We can seemingly want something else. But that which is relevant is always provided, and thus we can always acknowledge what we need is truly what's given, however we might see it. Jeff Green offers a beautiful teaching. Any desire that is relevant to the soul's ongoing evolutionary growth is bound to manifest. It's like feeling a calling towards something, but when it's resonant with our actual evolutionary needs, we're not going to be in relationship to it with any kind of grasping. And in fact, if we introduce grasping, we impede the natural unfolding of what wants to happen. Life wants to provide for what is relevant for its awakening. The energy of attachment and control, I want it now and in this way at this time, actually creates a vibrational block to what wants to unfold. So we're looking at these dynamics right now with the Pluto, we'll come into the Pluto retrograde with the Scorpio-Taurus axis really emphasize over the next few weeks. It takes us into a question like, what do I need? What do I want? What do I think I need versus what do I really need? And to understand that there's a coming into alignment with our path where we recognize all that is relevant and important for me is bound to manifest, to be in relationship to that where there's a trusting of the journey and also an appreciation for the content, the uncomfortable content that arises along the journey. It only points to where our path is right now. It's like the obsessions, the cravings, the fears, the strong emotions, all the scorpionic content. There is a way to be in relationship to that where it may not be comfortable, often isn't, but it actually can become the point of deeper gratitude, deeper devotion, deeper growth when we recognize it's arising because it's always been in here. And in the fact of it arising, it's actually objectless. Nothing's causing it. People aren't causing it. We may not fully understand that, but if we can practice that remembering, there's a way of allowing the life journey to take us where it wants us to go. We don't have to understand the hows and the whens and the wheres and but there's a trust in it. So often on the journey, we think that we won't get what we want if we don't control. We won't go to what's best for us. We won't arrive at our goal if we don't hold on. And yet, usually it's the very opposite. Our letting go, our allowing, and our facing ourselves, our being with ourselves, is often the very thing that's needed to allow life to do what we cannot do on our own. And it can really teach us and guide us in these profound ways. So all of this is really awake right now because Pluto is stationing at the same degree. It's basically at a standstill. It's not going to move forward anymore. An analogy that comes to mind, we can live our life and not necessarily be touching base with the shadow content, with our fears, our cravings, our obsessions, the areas of our own self-ignorance. They're not necessarily going to be reflected in our relationships, in the content of our human experience that will show us what's inside. But it's there. And we come to a point where it does reveal itself and we can't avoid it. The analogy that I have is, let's say you cooked rice in a pot and that rice just kind of got overly cooked and the very bottom of it has sort of crusted and stuck to it's bound to the bottom of that pot. You can rinse out the pot, clean it, and that rice can stay there. You can even continue to eat food. You can eat yogurt, you can eat cereal, you can do all kinds of things, and maybe occasionally your spoon will skim some of the crusty rice and you might taste a little bit of it, but since it's so crystallized, it's so stuck there, it won't really ever bother you so much. It's almost like it's a new floor layer to the pot. But let's say you start eating soup, right? You start putting content in there. You start relating to this pot in a new way. And you're eating the soup and suddenly it's like breaking up little pieces of crusted old rice. And it's really making the flavor of the entire soup taste like burnt food. It gets to a point where that crud is calling for release. It's no longer, we can't evolve or live or grow in the same way, not addressing this content. And that can come to a point where it feels like, it used to be so much easier to eat. Now it doesn't taste good. We can think of facets of our life. When I was in my early 20s, there are all these powerful miracles that happened and really profound visions, psychic experiences. And these things do happen today, but there was sort of this innocent flow of magic and wonder that was just profound and alive. And I often sense that along this soul's path, as I've gone deeper and deeper in just the content of my own evolutionary journey, the wonder and the amazement and the magic has not been as continuous in ways that it often has in the past. It doesn't mean it's gone. It means there's content calling my attention. And this is where the maturation and the growth and the real healing happens. How we are in relationship to the most uncomfortable places. We may not understand how beautiful and how powerful we are because underneath that crud is the pot. It's beautiful emptiness that can be used purely. Its function is highly diminished relative to what's unconscious. What is not met stays inside and it takes up space that we don't even realize it's occupying. We can't be used in deeper, more holy, more beautiful, more relevant ways when we're carrying content that takes up all the space. You can't use soup. You can't put certain things in that pot. It's gonna, be crudded. And this is a part of the journey. When Pluto goes retrograde, we're drawn within. And sometimes there's just so much power and potency in being with what we don't have an answer for, being in the process, being in the discomfort. And what is it like to Taurus relax? That Taurus North Node is a constant invitation for relaxation. Can we find a ground of stability and peace, an unconflicted state of being in the midst of all of this? With these eclipses happening on the nodes, with Uranus there too, on the North Node, moving closer and closer to the North Node, also squaring Saturn and Aquarius, there's a very strong movement and almost like inkling and sensing and smelling towards the destiny of all of this. What's emerging, and maybe we can't see it because relative to the content that has not yet cleared out, we can't really apprehend the beautiful, deeply harmonious and relevant path that wants to unfold, that is secure, that is best for all, that does not bring insecurity, that is not threatening. But it might not easily fit into the timeline or the boxes, the constructs that we might be most familiar with. The thing about that crud, that rice, is it has a lot of needs. It's going to need to control a lot, because if you put certain things in that pot, it'll get stirred up, right? So the consciousness of the pot relative to the psychology of resistance, which is akin to, I don't want to stir up this shit. I don't want to deal with this crud, will need to maintain and assert a lot of control, which is essentially a form of manipulation, to not bring up the content. And it grossly limits our potential. It grossly limits the beauty and the potency and the gift of this life, of this incarnation. So as Pluto stations, this is a wonderful time for prayer, for ceremony, for going within, having the humility to abstain from the answers of our life, and just noticing where we're called out of our center towards the grasping, the concern with what we might get, concern with what we might lose, and to move and to cultivate actions that are in alignment, so that we're purifying, we're learning, we're growing, we're healing through our experiences, and we're not so focused on object, we're not so concerned with outcome. That's a very wonderful attitude that I offer as a blessing for all of us. Much love to you all. Thank you for watching.